Good day, and welcome to the ILD Business Owners webinar to talk about how small firms are handling the crisis. My name is Jill Cody with Dark Light Design in Seattle, Washington, USA. I'd like to introduce our panelists. I'm really excited to be joined today by Anne, Morgan, and Andrew. Because today's focus is on small firms, I think we have a great sampling in terms of project types and geographic diversity here in North America. And here we are. Another thing that our firms have in common besides size is that we all work, again, like I said, on a diverse range of project types. And so with that, and also, in terms of just the sizes of our teams, I think we're all pretty similarly sized. With that bit of background, I think I just want to take a moment and recognize that this is a crisis on a global scale and acknowledge just the suffering that the virus itself is causing on a human level. We all play an important role in our families and communities going forward to recover. We also have an important role leading our businesses, and that's what we're here to share today. So this showed up on my to-do list app earlier this week, and I'm sure you can all empathize. It was a lot of work before COVID-19, as I'm sure you all know. And what I'm hearing from everyone is that the workload has only gone up for a variety of reasons. And that's on top of all the other roles, that we normally hold in our lives. So we've all been doing all these things along the way. And, I think of all the people that I know, including all of these guys here, and a lot of you, I think I've been always amazed and sort of humbled by how well everybody does all of these things sort of seamlessly. You'll see the little red box down in the lower right-hand side. Now a new one has been added to our list because I think we were always kind of crisis managers, and now we've had the added role of the global pandemic version of crisis manager, which is just added on to that load. As we were getting ready for this webinar and I was talking with Anne, Morgan, and Andrew, there was just some common themes that came out. And some of them are universal things that everybody, regardless of their profession, is dealing with on a personal level for sure. Just this idea, I think you've read about it, just this idea of sharing space. If you have another person that's working from home along with you, and how you sort of deal with that, or if you have children at home, depending on their age. I have a 14-year-old who is having the worst time ever spending time with both of her parents in very close proximity, which is its own struggle more for her probably than for us. I know, we've all been on calls where we can hear children in the background, and along with that, I think there's, Morgan brought up the idea of just worrying about others. I think we all have other people in our lives that we might be worried about along with that. So, I know Morgan, you brought that up, and I think just for a few minutes, I think to sort of touch on that, because I think, and I've talked to my team about this too, well, we all have to acknowledge that we're dealing with this in the context of what else is going on in life, right?
Right. I mean, you worry about your team members, and I don't know if we're going to discuss this further, but we're talking about a little bit about what we're doing internally to try and improve morale with our team members. Meanwhile, I know several people who have COVID-19 who are struggling with it or have moved past it, and then you worry about them. We are worried about family members, and then all of that stress builds up. But it's important also to take care of your team members. We are acknowledging that you don't need to be strapped into your desk for 8 hours a day because what you're doing is so intense already. Take breaks, go for a run, do what you have to do. We're also encouraging, we've also given personal days on us during the week because it's just so intense right now.
Right. And I think we'll talk a little more about just how, we can sort of support our teams as well a little bit later on. I think along with the personal side, as that everybody's dealing with, I think what came across is there are some things that are maybe amplified as a small business owner. And what struck me for all of you, my spouse works in the industry So we kind of have that stress of like what's happening with the industry. But what struck me about all of you guys is that your partners all work with you in the business. And so, it felt to me like, well,
Thanks, Jill.
I knew about some of you, but I didn't realize that about everybody. And so I think that felt to me like that's got to be a real amplification of just the pressure. So, I mean, maybe you guys could touch on that a little bit too. Maybe Andrew, because I didn't really realize that your wife worked with you.
Yeah, we just made that switch where Jennifer, my lovely and very patient wife, left a professional job of being a commercial banker to come and run the business with me, and we're only a year into that. And there was a lot of discussion in that, and the idea of relying on really making it truly a family business. And the COVID-19 has it's tested that idea of a diversity of income and what it really means to be a family business and a small business owner, with that being the only supplement. It's really changed our point of view on that. And just the overall, the idea of, as a small business owner, what is our own personal risk of continued income, right? And I think that idea of the level of risk you take in the job that you choose has really changed a lot for us, and also for our employees. We're a government town, so we're surrounded by people right now who don't have any risk in that, and it really has changed. The decision to be an independent designer, to work for a small firm, is very much, there's been a lot of discussion about that amongst our team.
And did you want to touch on that a little bit too? As I mean, you've had a different situation where your spouse has worked in the firm for a long time.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's one of those things you take day by day, right? It's one of those, right now we're good. Like right now, like, okay, focus on what we've got, reach out to our clients that we've got, kind of get the pulse of what's going to be going on. I want that crystal ball. But having John, work with me, as some of you know, my father was my inspiration for starting the business 25 years ago. And I said, I don't know anything about taxes, finance, or insurance. And he said, I'll be your business manager. So in marrying John, over the years, John picked up that ball and is running with it. But I don't have that, Andrew, what you have, because I've had that in a way all along. So there's only so much you can worry about, and it's like, they say 90% of what you worry about never happens. So I choose that that 10%, like, don't worry. You just go forward, and you're doing the best you can, and with the projects that are coming in. And of course, we are updating our marketing and all these things during this time. But I don't think like, oh my gosh, we've got all our eggs in one basket. What the heck? I don't.
Okay, cool. You actually, Anne, you mentioned the thing that was sort of coming up was just, talking then about impacts on the business, which, it's funny, we all sort of started talking about how it impacts us personally, and we all sort of started talking about how that works into the business, which I think is, the thing about all of this is that things are so interlinked. But you mentioned just, talking on the client side and reaching out to clients already. And I think, we wanted to just sort of touch on that about, how we deal and, the changes in terms of obviously how we deal with clients. And now, in-person meetings are out for now. And I think the question of how that's changed our interactions, I personally have realized like a lot of those in-person meetings aren't quite as necessary as I thought, but there have just been a few times where it's like, gosh, this would be a million times more efficient and easier if we were just all in the same room together, because there's, even yesterday, somebody was having a real problem communicating a concept, and we can try to, draw on our little whiteboard apps that we share screens with or whatever, but it was just not getting through. So I think the question of there's sort of two sides to the client equation, which is the design and work side of it. And then there's, sort of how are we communicating to our clients on the, just the business side. And I think you sort of touched on, Anne, that even some of your staff have been reaching out, just, trying to communicate like, hey, how are you guys doing? Or, hey, what are you working on? We're still here. I've been hearing from some of our clients, at bigger firms, just that, they're stressed about their own layoffs and things like that too. So, Morgan, what have you been hearing on your client side?
Pretty much everybody wants to talk, and everybody seems to be on the same page, is what I've found when I talk to clients. That they're having the same struggles we're having, and but they are all willing to talk about it, and they all it seems like you've peeled something back, because people are more open in discussing. Particularly, I think the one thing and we'll get to this more, is cash flow. I know we're all worried about cash flow, as are our clients. So we've been having some really honest conversations with our clients that way. Typically, sometimes collecting money on a regular basis is challenging enough as it is. And over the past 7 or 8 weeks, it's been becoming more challenging. So we just keep talking to our clients and having those conversations.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's come up in our conversations is just that there's this uncertainty and like strangeness where some things are slowing down and some of that, cash flow things are getting just weird, right? And then we've all had some projects that sort of started up, and then it was, which felt like great. And so, we're all really happy and excited about it, but there seems to be just some real, like everything, they say this is a strange and unsettling time. And even on that front, it's like some things are going forward that, to me, I had a project start up that was really surprising, that I thought for sure had been getting ready to ramp up. And when they actually pulled the trigger, I was like, wow, that's really great and amazing, but I was very surprised. I think another part, one of the things that we were talking about on the business side was just the team, which I think is such a huge focus for all of us. And this is, I think, one of the things that I felt with all of us is, you're trying to lead your team, and, this is that role where it's like, here we are, we have to be like part cheerleader, but we have to be realistic. And I think just hearing from all of you about, big thing was just communication being key, trying to have, I don't air quotes face-to-face time, because obviously we're doing it just like this through the screen. And what I heard from you guys was just this transparency, but an appropriate level, obviously, being realistic with our teams about what's happening, and, offering the reassurance that we can, while being honest. I think one of the big things for everybody is just, how are we working remotely? And I think for our team, it's been just a lot of, for me personally, and a lot of extra work, in terms of, like, we had a new person start on February 10th, and a new grad, and just, I think there are a lot of, depending on where your team is on the spectrum of experience and just like comfort, Andrew's mentioned, just like, you're starting to see like who on the team really can sort of like handle it. And maybe you could just talk through that, like starting to see how things sort of shake it out.
I think there's a few things that's come up, and it's been a lot harder. And we discussed this. I'm an over-the-shoulder reviewer, and you
I think we all are, Andrew.
Yeah, you're like, oh, what are you doing there? And you have a sense just from walking the office of where people are at, but also you have a sense of what their strengths and capabilities are, that you lose. You lose the ability to nudge efforts one way or the other. And so one of the things that's come up is that it's really changed. People's strengths and weaknesses are being revealed a little bit more, and also I find people aren't as able to get that little bit of assistance, or they're not as willing to get as much assistance from their neighbor. We work in really close quarters, and so people are able to ask questions, help out, and my team are communicating with each other on, through the electronic means. But I think there's just that extra little bit of gap there. And so the working from home and working remotely has really brought to the fore each individual's strengths and weaknesses quite a bit more. And it also shows, who's really good at getting and working with their teammates, and who shrinks into their own little bubble. And they're actually the ones that I worry about lacking the communication as well. The people who really need to have people around them to be happy working and to be motivated.
It's funny because I think there's an introvert extrovert thing maybe at play there. Like, it sounds to me like you have an extrovert who might need to interact with others. I actually have an introvert who won't necessarily ask for help, who I'm very concerned about, like, just getting overloaded. So I think that idea of just being able to see what's going on, and part of me this is not serious at all, but I wish I could have the Zoom screen up all day and just see what everybody's doing and sort of see their screen, not in that creepy big brother way, but just so I kind of have the feel for, like, oh, this person's getting really bogged down. The same thing that you would see like when you're kind of walking around the office. This is not possible or even really desirable, but I do worry sort of about what we're missing in that case. And Ann and Morgan, I didn't know, we talked a lot, so I can't distill all of our conversations, but and just so everybody knows, the reason I keep looking that way is that I have them on screen over there and I have the presentation over there. So I'm not as shifty as I look, but those of you who know how shifty I am. But just to give you guys a heads up as to what's going on with all of that eye darting. I think you guys can talk about your office environment too, and just how that's changed with all of this.
I think similar to what Andrew was saying, but my team has really stepped up. I want to say they're really going above and beyond. And I think, Ann, you said something about this the other day about how people are really, the team is being supportive of us and of each other. And they're really, it's emotionally supportive, as well as they're working hard as hell on top of it, because we still have a very big workload. And I also want to touch back on something else Andrew had said about, you're talking about transparency with your team. We've had that conversation with them about, where we are with cash flow, with fines for PPP, and the whole process of what we're going through, which is sort of behind the scenes that you don't see. And they were relieved by the conversation rather than additional stress added to them.
Yeah, and I would say too, I mean, we're talking to our team every day. We have Microsoft Teams, so it's just a click away, which has been a godsend, because it's not having to pick up a phone, and to be able to share screens and to talk with them. And I have been, before this, I would go out with each one of them once a month and have for a cup of coffee. Now, like I did it this morning with one of the girls, and we're just, kind of just getting caught up, and I can see that they're all relaxed, which, really at the end of the day, no matter what's going on, I just want them to not feel like the weight of the world is on their shoulders, that they can do what they do best. And I think that's been a relief. And as Morgan said, I've seen people ramp up. I have a mentor in my office. I never knew that she had that gift. She's mentoring somebody, and occasionally I have to tell one of them, like, oh, have you spoken to so and so lately? Because they're not on the same teams. No. I'm like, well, send her an article, send her something, I don't know, whatever. But so that you have to kind of, if they're not on the same team, granted we are, up on our team's meetings twice a week, in an office meeting, and then we'll have one this afternoon on just kind of what the heck, like articles we've seen or webinars that we've heard that there's something interesting, or I loved somebody's quote, if you saw Howard Branston's, webinar, that, just, it's all those things, but it's communication and I think transparency, though, to a point, because I don't want them to be too nervous. I don't want them You know, they know we're trying everything, like the PPP. We're trying everything we can, like no holds barred. But I think at the same time, I don't want to say, well, I heard that this architectural firm laid off so many people, and this one did this, and like, you know, I just don't. That's clutter in their brains that they really just don't need. It's not at this time.
Right. And I think it's interesting that you're having, you know, like people reach out that maybe don't usually. We've actually, because we have so many people that don't always work together, I've sort of laid down this edict that everybody once a day has to have a one-on-one with somebody. Because we have a lot of people that would just kind of like go heads down and just be isolated all day long. And they would maybe even naturally be that way a little bit in the office, but they're sort of forced to interact a little bit. And so everybody has to on teams kind of like talk to somebody else that at some point during the day, and it's kind of like a joke. I make it like a joke, but I'm really quite serious. I do have to say, I thought we were set up to work remotely pretty well. Like we all had remote access, and you know, we weren't big Slack users because our version of Slack was to stand up in the office and go like, hey, what about that? You know, like it wasn't like we didn't have to hashtag and type anything. Like we just talked with each other. And even though I felt like we were set up from a technology standpoint, our sort of like our work into the tech took us a few weeks solid of just being able to have it, not the technology working smoothly, but just us getting used to kind of using it. So, you know, it took me a while to just go, and we were having meetings every morning for, I mean, we still have one, we touch base as a group every single day for like 15 minutes just to make sure everybody's got, like our new person has enough work to do, you know, people are making sure that they're keeping her sort of activated and things like that. But even me getting used to just hitting the video call button to sort of like I would normally just walk up to somebody's desk, and it took me a while to realize like, oh, that's just like walking up to somebody's desk, because I'm the person that needed almost the most education in a way. So I think across the board, even not just my team, but like me, needed a ton of just re-education as to what it meant to use all this stuff, right? Okay, I think, you know, I think there's the now, and I think one of the things that we were sort of talking about was just like, what does this mean for the future? Just touching on a little bit, you know, looking forward, I think we've all realized that this isn't necessarily going to be over anytime soon. And even, you know, if a miracle cure were to show up today, I think the repercussions of what's happening are going to be felt for a really long time. So I think just, you know, quick discussion, I think, about for the profession as a whole. And I think then we're going to work into like maybe what this means individually for our businesses. You know, what do we think it means for the profession in terms of our, like, is it good news or bad news for lighting design? I think it's interesting because I think there were some maybe little bit different opinions on this just among our group. So Andrew has a viewpoint that I know about. And I think what's interesting is, as the setup for this, I think, you know, where the profession was going beforehand, I think was a little bit, you know, for debate, depending on who you talk to. And I think obviously there's market forces and individual markets at work there too, and just the role of the lighting designer in the ecosystem as a whole. So whether this is, you know, sort of start to push in a different direction or sort of exacerbates the existing condition, I think is an interesting conversation.
Yeah, and one of the things that that we were discussing and looking at the industry is, and it's really sort of a, you know, thinking about, you know, post-depression ideas, but it's that idea of when we get out of this, are people going to be trying to do the most for the least amount of money, and are they still going to be willing to invest in design, big D design? Are they going to be willing to invest in things that take a little while to have a return on investment? And will the notion of a full complement of subconsultants be seen as a luxury level versus an essential level? Like, you know, so there's that idea of when construction gets back to business, what will just the feelings about, you know, the real client in the end, who might not be an architect, but the, you know, is a client going to say, look, just give me a building. I don't really care about all the fancy stuff right now. We just want to spend as little money as possible to get the program that we've identified. Will get us through to the next period. So it'll be interesting, I think, for the profession to try and make sure that we're as essential as possible, which, that's been part of our message for a long time. But I think there will be, even as I myself think about the expenses that I want to be making personally and professionally, I'm already feeling that idea of low risk, keep it simple, just do what needs to be done, and so that's one of the things that is on our mind.
Okay, I know that Morgan and Ann have a little bit different view of that, but maybe Morgan, you could go first.
Yeah, I feel like I said that, prior to the recession, I felt that lighting design wasn't the icing on the cake, it was the sprinkles that went on the icing on the cake. And I feel like in those 12 years since the recession, or since we've come out of the recession, or went into it, the role of the lighting designer has become much more essential. I feel like I see many more RFPs where they require it. I also feel like with the growth of technology right now, not just LED, but there's a whole other world of PoE, or the Internet of Things, and with that technology, I've seen our role on the team, on the construction team, expand into what our deliverables are, what we're documenting, and what we're providing, and the service we're providing. So I think it's essential what we offer, and I think we will remain an integral part of any design team. I do think we are going to change after this, and how this changes, I don't know what it is, but I suspect there will be changes to the built environment that impact our profession.
And Anne, I think you had an interesting a point, just was sort of transferred, like sends us to our next topic about the more immediate future, just in terms of how real estate's going to kind of be impacted in terms of like rework, right?
Yeah, I was thinking that, of course, I'm always trying to make lemonade, right? So I was seeing two different areas that might and might also help us. And I agree with Morgan. Like, I don't think architects can easily do lighting design for anything above ordinary. And then, and same with the repping agencies. They all do good work. They're all needed, whatever. But I think if you're going to have an exceptional building, I think you still need a lighting designer. So I don't think that's going away. But I could see a couple of scenarios. One is downsizing. I talked with the owner of an architectural firm yesterday, an international firm, and she said, I am going to give the choice to my staff if they want to come back and work in the building. So I could see restacks. I could see, instead of 5 floors of some downtown something, they're down to 3 floors. So which we've already seen in these last number of years anyhow. So like with hoteling and stuff like that. So I think that's not far-fetched, because if it's like, I think industry is going to allow some consulting, kind of industries will allow that. And I think the other thing is just the whole UV and disinfecting with light. And I know the IES is having a seminar this coming Thursday. It's a 4-hour seminar, and they have their photobiology committee giving the seminar on killing bacteria or inactivating viruses. So I'm having my whole team listen to it. I'm like, I don't care if you're reorganizing your files and listening to this, but I think that I could see public places going, oh my gosh, how can we kill, bacteria or fungus or whatever, while, after hours or something in public, bathrooms, elevators, public, auditoriums, I don't know, so I think that might be the cake, Morgan, to put it in your analogy, instead of the icing or the sprinkles, it's like that. Then when you can say, well, you can reduce insurance because your bacteria levels, like you could justify that lighting. So Andrew, I'm giving that to you, is learn up on it, and the thing is that I mean, so you have to look, what are the opportunities? What is going to come out of this? You know, we're not going to be relighting necessarily home offices, but you know, what is the mindset of people? If you could say with lighting, like with Indigo Clean, which a couple manufacturers are using, and actually, I'm not going to say who they are, but you know, they're using UV in architectural product, not just some sterilizing fixture, you know, like that's industrial looking, but they're putting in an architectural fixture. So maybe this is going to come out. Who knows?
Okay.
Yeah, I've certainly I've seen, you know, that talk of what's next, and in the Internet of Things, you know, I think our key role is working with light, but I'm seeing more and more of our being relied upon to do that as sort of, you know, maybe 60% of the job, but then also to do the other 40% of being the third party, even third party to the electrical engineers on the job, of being the third party trusted resource for the Internet of Everything lighting for our clients. And you know, the work that we've had start up since the start of this is actually exactly for that, to help you know, on a portfolio basis, to help clients make decisions. So that is something that I think is going to continue to happen, and will give us the opportunity to be a little bit more flexible in what we do for the next while. But for me, it's that idea of, you know, for the industry overall, all of those spaces that may not get renovated for a little while everybody is figuring out what to do. So I think we'll have a period. I think we'll have a little bit of a period of change while everyone has the wait and see approach, and we'll need to get through that.
That brings us maybe to the next thing about just the future in terms of business, and you know, starting to make everybody express the concern, like maybe like the workload's fine now, but starting to worry about the pipeline, you know, as you know, in the next few months, and just thinking about how backlog might be affected and just what that means in terms of cash flow. I think, you know, I think there's some thoughts about like now, or you know, our payments slowing down now, but also as you start to look forward, you know, what does that mean about cash flow going forward when the work pipeline, you know, you might start to see shrinking, you know, like how many new projects are really, you know, are people really planning right now? You know, I know that we see that. I'm concerned about that. Like we're fine for right now, knocking on wood, you know, just assuming that nothing goes on hold, but you know, I think the cash flow idea, and I think we've started to talk about just what's really essential, I think both in terms of like staff and like, and Andrew, you brought it up in terms of expenses, right? It's funny, like Morgan brought up the real estate thing, and I always used to feel like a little bit bad about like our office is not really nice, right? I mean, it's not in the nicest office building at all. You know, the street culture is like a little bit maybe iffy getting there. But once you get into our office, it's fine. But, you know, I always felt, and I purposely made a decision when we were looking for our office space that I just didn't want to, especially our market at the time was really hot with tech. We were fighting tech companies and the whole business to try and find space. And, you know, I made a decision to not spend a lot of money on our office space. And even now I'm feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm spending, you know, now I haven't been in, or no one's been in our office for, you know, for 6 weeks now. And I can't see when we're going to come back. And, you know, like our landlord still is, you know, he fully expects his rent check, rightfully. So, you know, I think just those thoughts about like what's essential, or, you know, Morgan, you mentioned rethinking your real estate strategy. I had a thought like, well, okay, when this goes on, we don't need the number of seats that we have. We were not really ever full, and will never be, I don't think we'll ever be having everybody in the same office at the same time consistently again. So do I start to look at, you know, like leasing out seats as a, you know, mini co-working kind of thing, or, you know, just like, but also I think just in terms, we were all talking, I think mostly about essentiality in terms of both staff and expenses. And so I know, Andrew, you had brought that up in terms of how you were starting to think about that.
Yeah, well, and you know, even in our team, we automatically right at the start of this said, okay, no significant expenses. We'll take a wait and see approach. Thankfully, we're not missing any conferences because the conferences aren't happening. But when I look at my professional development budget, how much am I going to take a wait and see approach on that? So I think the crisis has made us question all of the commitments that we make as a firm, as the decision makers of the firm, and that's commitment to the quality of staff space at the office. How much elbow room do you get? How nice is it? The commitment to professional development expenses, all of those, all of the what might be considered nice to have or might be considered essential depending on our own philosophy of running a business. So I don't think the philosophy has really changed yet, but every philosophy is being questioned.
Right.
And it's much more than the sort of, we did it this year because we did it last year case.
And how's that changed? Oh, sorry.
One of the things also, I think, the same on that is the philosophy of staff size, right? How big an office do we need to be in order to do the work that we want to do? I think we're all right at that kind of sweet spot of having enough people to have a flexible team. And it's really hard to do the same thing with, half the staff or double the staff. It ends up being a really different scenario. I've been up at twice the size, and it's a very different role as a boss. But again, that's part of the question of how big do we need to be?
Right. And how has it changed your view of essentiality, I guess?
It's hard, right? Because you're always trying to be staffed at like the zenith, like that sweet spot. So I think, just kind of flashing back to what we said too as far as expenses, like we in office size, and we shortly after the whole thing came down, we reached out to our landlords and said, how can you help us? And they immediately said, we can cut your rent in half and for 3 months, and put that in a year from now, so we'll be paying it. They're not losing money long term, but they knew right now cash flow was tight. So it was like, and clearly somebody else before us had even asked that situation. And as far as staffing, I think, we all, no one wants to go there, right? No one was like, we talked about the different ways we could handle this. Like, oh, would you lose a staff member? Things that, I had heard from other people is like, well, they cut everybody's hours from 40 to 30, so like keep everybody on staff, be a lean, mean designing machine, but I think to our points, we thought, think about where we were just 6 months ago, just 4 months ago in this amazing economy that we could not hire somebody. We could not hire somebody. I mean, and now I think that the scales from their eyes have fallen off, so to speak. I think people are genuinely appreciative of having a job. And, like there is I have a great team, but I can see this, like, okay, just I called out, I reached out, all these people taking the initiative in ways that they probably wouldn't. And to Morgan said, you see things out of your employees that you never realized they had in them, which is, really fulfilling. And you're like, okay, great, I've got a good team, kind of thing. But it is, we all have to, like, what is that next step? What step do we have to make next? And none of, of course, I mean, if things don't go back to the way things were. So it's
Right.
Not fun to think about.
Right. Morgan, what about you?
Right now, everybody and everything is essential. It feels very essential. The thing that seems least essential, like you touched on this earlier, is the office. And it's important because it's important to your culture to develop the culture that you want. So for Jim and I, we want everybody to hear how we talk to clients, how we talk to contractors, how we respond to problems. So it creates the culture that we promote in how just the culture that we promote. And I don't enjoy working from home either. We had already been set up for it prior to this just because of travel, and we have a satellite office. And anyhow, that said, I think there is some hybrid solution to it. And I don't mean like a WeWork or a co-working space. There's got to be some other angle to it. I plan to study that once we get out of this, because I do find, as much as I enjoy an open office, and like Andrew's saying, checking on everybody and checking on their work, it's also very distracting to be in an open office for me. I get much more done in an hour coming in early in the morning or on the weekend or at home than I do in, say, 3 or 4 hours in the open office environment. So that's the part I don't find essential. I'm going to look at maybe a different way of creating our office and our office culture in a hybrid solution.
Yeah, and speaking of hybrids, I had been thinking about, when we go back, like, I don't know that we all are, in my case, like, is everybody going to be in every day? No. I mean, I found that for me, actually, it's much more efficient for me to be at home because my interruption level is much lower, right? And the amount of time, like Morgan mentioned, the amount of time just traveling to meetings in Metro Atlanta, which, even we all have heard about your traffic issues, but even for me, like most of my meetings are within walking distance, but that extra 15 minutes on each side of walking, like that's a lot of time. So, and just, being able to put my head down and not have the interruptions, like my efficiencies increase even as the amount of time, thank goodness, because, the amount of time that we're all spending has been a lot. So I think, yeah, the changes are going to remain to be seen. I think as we kind of head towards, I want everybody to encourage the audience to send some questions in. We're going to be heading towards that section here. I just wanted to sort of wrap up with a few thoughts. It's funny, as we were, we prepped for this, I came across this quote, which was just, just thinking about, like, in the long term, like, what is everybody's core value? And, at the same time, we all need to adjust. Obviously, the world's always changing, and this is a really big shift. And so I came across this quote, we need to preserve our values, and yet at the same time, adapt to a changing world. And as we were exchanging emails, getting ready for this, I got this amazing quote from our panelist, Anne, which was interesting because clearly she's been channeling like one of these great business books. But, I thought it was interesting in that the good news is that I think we've already, as a profession, already been dealing with just the changes when we think about what's been happening in the profession for the last few years. We've been talking already about like the POE and IoT type of things, and just how quickly we've had to learn quickly about a lot of things just in the last decade, right? Or last two. Just the funny things that I tell sometimes our new staff, well, there used to be these things called fluorescent lamps, sometimes you'll have to go look one up. And, so just how quickly we're all having to adapt and change, I think does suit us, set us up really well for what's sort of coming. So I just thought it was kind of prescient that Anne had sent this, and she didn't even know that, she was among the great business minds out there. I just think also, I just wanted to, sort of personally say, like, remind everybody, there's the old saying, like, you have to put on your oxygen mask first, which I think is like a little bit cliched. But I also think, I mean, as a reminder, like, we're used to taking care of others. I think, just a reminder, like, we have to take care of ourselves, because if you don't survive, your business isn't going to. I think we've all been running, really hard to kind of deal with this. I know I have, and I don't feel like it's getting better very quickly, but as we realize that this is going on for a long time, I think we really do need to find a way to sort of settle into some kind of a routine where we have a way to allow ourselves some time I had been sitting in this chair, which thankfully I dragged my good Herman Miller chair in from the office because I'd been sitting in an IKEA chair, for example. It was hurting me. But I had been in this chair, in this room for like 14 hours a day. And finally, I had somebody tell me, you really have to get out and get outside every day. So I've been getting up a little bit early. I live in a beautiful place and I'm looking out the window at it, but just to get out in the morning and take a walk, even though, I don't feel like getting up early. So I think just that idea of self-care. I think also, there's been some horrible news out there. I think I'm always just sort of heartened by the reminders that we're not alone in all of this. I think things like this have been really great. Those Zoom happy hours that people talk about, I am a part of one. It's most weeks like the highlight of my week, quite honestly. It's happening this afternoon. I'm very excited and can't wait for that. I also think, just a reminder to everybody, there's great news out there. Just the way that I think a lot of society's pulling together has been, to me, like just really a reminder of just the good news out there in humanity land. And I think, for us in the ILD, I think, here's just a reminder of the fact that, we do really have this amazing community. And, as I was sort of like flipping through these pictures, it was, we've all been at these events and just, these are our friends, these are our colleagues. This community is here. I'd encourage people to reach out to your fellow lighting designers and friends. Someday we'll all be back doing this again, and I really can't wait. I think it's been really hard. Part of my social life is like all these conferences and things like that. So saying like there's no light fair this year, I'm like, but I don't get to see all my friends at light fair. It's been really hard, and I think it's a small part of the struggle, but it's a real thing. And so I think I just want to leave this up while we take questions, because I think just acknowledging that part of the reason that we do the work that we do is to make the world better, but also just trying to understand that we have resources out there is important. I'm going to try, maybe Joe can try to help me to expand the questions window. This is where tech is going to be a thing. All right, I'm going to figure this out. Yeah.
If you just hit the little drop-down button next to the left of questions, it'll.
I got it. Let's see. What are your top 3 tips for small firms to focus on moving forward? I guess maybe I can throw this out to our team here. I think it's hard to know in what context. I think I'd just say I had a moment where I saw something on the news where like Susie Orman, I don't know if you're familiar with her, but her big thing is always like, pay off your bills. And she was like, don't pay off your bills, literally like cash. So, I mean, I think the idea of like, one of the big things I think just obviously is like managing cash flow, to me feels like the biggest thing from a business standpoint. If you can't make payroll, if you can't make your rent, it doesn't matter much what your projects are, right? I think that's a big one. I don't know what else you guys have in mind.
There's one thing that we talked about, and that is keeping a really close eye on what costs are you deferring, because just exactly like Anne mentioned on the rent, we've had all of these kind of offers and opportunities to defer costs. But if you don't have that really big number posted on the board that allows you to understand what have I changed from, the day-to-day that I'm doing right now, all of a sudden it has this additional liability that's, looming is the wrong word, but something just to take into account is how much are you deferring? And to not allow yourself to get into the situation where, we're all deferring the payments, but make sure that you know exactly where you're at on that. We're being careful that way.
Yeah, I am too. I mean, we're getting like, you don't have to pay your, this tax or that tax. Well, I mean, it's going to come due at some point, right? So we're being careful to just sort of set that aside because we know it does come due. Morgan or Ann, did you have any thoughts on that?
I think moving forward too, the having the transparency and having an open and honest conversation with not only your team but your clients, so you know where you are, and I think that will give you some peace and some peace of mind and help going forward. So because we don't know what's next, right? But if you have the conversations of knowing about, oh well, maybe you'll be paid in a month, or we'll have it then, or I don't have it now, but I had a conversation with the owner, and then you have something more tangible that you can grasp onto.
Yeah.
And I think just to also put in, this is not 2008, and I have to tell myself that at least once a day. Like, this is not, the recession. We were in a very strong economy. I'm not saying that we're going to be coming back full throttle, whatever, but at the same time, it might be different. It will be different, but I don't think this is 2008. And we just have to be, people are not going to evaporate.
Yeah, thanks for saying that, because having gone through 2008 to 2010, I mean, I guess I think that's what, you're like, oh God, are we doing this again? Is that going to happen again? I think that is on the forefront of plenty of people's minds.
Yeah. We had another question asking basically what ways do you see that the crisis can bring forth some positives in terms of maybe being more innovative or more creative? I actually got a call from one of my clients, and we were just talking about, like, how are you dealing with it? It was pretty early on, and their firm is a landscape architect, and their firm had just gone through kind of like an annual retreat type of thing where they had talked about some changes that they were going to make, and he said it was really great timing. And one of the things that they had talked about was just using this time to kind of put some of those things into effect. And so he said, now's your time. So I thought, that's kind of an interesting way of just, like, you're really going to, again, like we talked about what's essential, look at what are you doing that's essential, even in terms of your processes, right? So, like, we used to have this weekly meeting where we sort of sat around at lunch and talked about, like, what project things are coming up. And it's like, okay, clearly we don't need to have that anymore. So I think just, have you guys come across anything that you feel like process changes or things that are, like, maybe making you do things more creatively or in a different way, that you feel like the adaptation that you've made is something that maybe will stick after this is over?
I think just, being able to update, our marketing, our website, getting, putting up, collecting the photos that we have of past projects. I'm awful with a capital A at marketing. But, just being able to streamline and to be able to go through, and I've encouraged, like, okay, when you don't have anything to do because you're waiting for, answers back on whatever, go through that file and make sure that that it's in order. And the reason I say that too is we are in a unique time, because last Friday I was cleaning out binders, like old project binders. And it's like, now that we're working remotely, it's like, okay, guys, all the notes have to be on the computer. Everything has to be accessible from the computer. So from that standpoint, we are going to be much more paperless. I love paper. I write my notes in paper, but now I'm updating them in the computer digitally. So everybody has it. And I mean, thank goodness we have a server, because, having laptops, having, the things that we have, the teams and stuff like that, everything has to be digital.
All right. Somebody actually asked something that I think is really interesting, is if you could go back 2 or 3 months, what would you have done differently if you knew what was coming? I don't know. Gosh. I have to say I did something that I didn't know was going to be really good, and I just lucked out, which was that we actually bought all new computers for, like, all of our workstations were really old and horrible. And we bought them in January. Now the bill just came due. That's, like, maybe the downside, but I can't imagine trying to have my team working remotely with our old machines that were always kind of needing a restart, or, we had like 8 different versions of every piece of software on them. Like, everything from a technology side for us is really as good as it can be. So I just got lucky. That I would go back and do totally again. But that's not because I was especially smart, just because I was super duper lucky. Do any of you guys have anything that you like wish, I wish I hadn't signed as long a lease as I had, but that was like a few years ago.
We're in much the same boat, except my computers didn't come. They were supposed to be delivered April 4th, and I still haven't seen them. So I've got new laptops for staff, new workstations, new server sitting out in the ether somewhere. But we actually found that we were really well set up for working remotely. I think that if I were to go back a couple of months and we wouldn't change a lot, but I think that one of the key differences now is we're more appreciative of our clients, and my staff are more appreciative of their job. And I think we actually have done so far a really good job of team building. But that idea of being more about a team going together and going out into the world and doing professional work and taking care of our clients, as opposed to me being that and my staff providing service to me. I think that's I want to do even more of that, and that's one of the things that I would look to have done even more of. That idea of you're not just providing something to me and then I'm selling it out to our clients, that we're building these relationships together and encouraging the staff to have a specific relationship with their clients and their connections at each one of those companies. I think those are what's going to get us the best work coming out of this, is those relationships.
Yeah, and I think that's always been true, and I think obviously going through this. So we are at time, and I don't know how hard Joe from IALD is gonna hold us to our time. So
no, let's do one more question. Let me pick one out here. Let's see, how about this one? Let's see. Work from home has seemed to de-stress a lot of our designers. Any thoughts about a hybrid work environment to allow work part-time from home and part-time in the office? We'll make that the last one.
Yeah, I think that's probably the way to go back. I think what's going to be hard, and I'll let everybody else speak to this in a second. I think as I thought about it, it's like, gosh, it would be great if we just say we're back on Tuesdays and Thursdays. But I think the challenge is going to be our clients are going to have a different idea of what that schedule ought to be. And so, I wish the world would just decide like in-person meetings take place on these days and everybody gets to work from home on those days. I don't think it's going to be that organized, but I think definitely what I'm missing, I think what we're all missing, is the ability to have everybody in the office together from a collaboration standpoint. And I just don't know how that's, without it being total chaos, how we're going to be able to work that out. But I don't know how the rest of you are thinking of going back or hybridizing our together time.
Well, as I said, I certainly am, but I think that's part of also how you select your team and the people that you bring into your team. And I know for especially in a small office, you really have to, it's not just about somebody's skills or what they bring, but it's also about their personality and how they fit your corporate culture that you're providing, and how they fit into that, and are they an efficient worker, and there's so many other questions about that, the character of somebody and how it plays into a small office that would support the idea of a hybrid working environment.
And I could see people wanting to come back. I have one worker that lives a mile away. She's single. She wanted to come in. Like, I think we're her social life, quite frankly, which is kind of, but it's like some people need that structure and they know that about themselves. And I think we are looking at technology to have that more open office. One of our designers moved away during this thing. It was planned and everything like that. So we had gotten a lot of software up to speed, but I think we're trying to get a camera. Speaking of open office, we're trying to get a camera so she can just hear the banter across the office, the jokes, the rep coming in. I think, one thing that one of you had said, reminded me, like, the reps. What are the reps going to do? Because we have had in our little Thursday, Friday afternoon things, we're like, okay, so see this fixture? Here it is. It's got really good color timing. It really looks awful on the screen, but it's really nice. Like, there is no, you have to feel the light, right? So I think the reps are going to have a real hard time now. I think they're going to be shipping tons of samples to tons of homes.
Yeah, we were already working in a hybrid condition. I had most of my staff had some working at home schedule. Some of my staff only came in 3 days a week. Some of them just had 1 day a week of dedicated at home. Always with the idea that, if there was a client meeting, face-to-face client meeting that was, important enough, that they were going to need to be able to have a flexible schedule in order to do that. So we were already there in a big way, and I think for the most part to the benefit of everybody. But for example, on Mondays, which was when we had our regular office meeting, everybody comes in Mondays, right? We have at least that 1 day a week where everybody is in, everyone is connected for the whole work day. But we were already there, and I'm starting to see now the difference between that flexibility to come and to go versus everybody just working remote. And I think that there is absolutely that that need to bring people together. But I could even see if you had 3 days a month where everybody is together for all 3 days doing specific things, maybe that's when reps are doing bigger presentations, and then a day a week otherwise, right? There really is a lot more, I can see a lot more flexibility working out.
Great. All right. Well, I think that's probably our time to wrap it up. I do want to thank Anne and Morgan and Andrew so much. It's been just a great experience this week working with you guys. And of course, I'm lucky to have friends like this. So I just want to thank you all. And
thank you, Jill.
Yeah, and I want to thank Joseph and Teresa at the IALD for helping to facilitate this. And I want to thank our audience for being with us. So I just want to wish everybody well, and wish everybody safety and for you and your loved ones going forward. So thank you all, and have a great day and week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers.
Thanks. Bye, everybody. Hope to see you soon.